forecast, we decide to head fishing over to southeast Oregon. And this is the time of year when all the young animals are out and the flowers are in bloom. So what a great time of the year to go in spite of the thunder showers. A black cloud is hanging over the sagebrush plain of southeast Oregon as we push on eastward. We've already seen a few strikes of lightning. I've always heard about the great fishing in Chickahominy Reservoir, but I've never tried it. So it's about time we go in and give it a try. With my prune card, we get by with camping for $4 a night, and we get a lot of information from the camp host here. She tells us what kind of fish, what size, and where to catch them. So that sounded to us like a really good deal. She also made mention about the wind that blows here, but who hasn't seen a little wind? That's perfectly all right with me. I enjoy the wind. We set up our tent, inflate the air mattress, and cover it with that buffalo robe. Just in case it gets cold tonight, we're at least not going to be cold. We go down and test the water and see if there's some of those big fish she was telling about. Right before the sun sets, we'll have time to do it. This seems to be Marge's lake. I couldn't buy a bite or get a bite from a fish, but Marge seemed to hook onto them on a regular basis, so I guess this is her lake. As the sun slowly creeps down toward the horizon over Chickahominy Reservoir, Marge has one on now, and I hope he's a good one. We could have a nice fish dinner. Maybe next time I should leave Marge at home. That's kind of destroying my macho tough guy image with her catching all the fish here. But maybe with a little luck, as I go to net this fish for her, I can just knock him off the line by accident, and she probably won't know the difference. Or she might blame me of that, whether it's my fault or whether I do it deliberately or not. So maybe I better just sit back there and try my best to net that fish. And he does look like he'd make really good meal for supper tonight. And when she's not there, I can always say that it was me that caught that fish, I guess. Let's see how big he is. Oh, he's a pretty big one.
Here.
Back this way a little. She doesn't have to be so pleased with it, though. We fished till the keeper of the stars put the sun away with a spectacular show over Chickahominy Reservoir in southeast Oregon. We were the only ones out here, and the silence of the sunset was only interrupted by the sound of the wind and a few bird calls off in the distance. While we were fishing, the wind pulled a little trick on us, called flattening our tent out and even breaking one of the poles. This is our brand new tent, and this is the shakedown cruise for it, and it looks like it didn't hold up as good as it could have. I fix it back up, stake it down good so we can get in it and go to sleep, but yet that wind is to get even worse. These little tents just seem to have a little bit of problem in the wind, and we're having a little trouble. It was almost to fly away like a parachute or something. So it took us both to hold it down and get it staked back down to good sturdy stakes that we drove in with a sledgehammer. The wind had no mercy on us though. It just kept howling and hammering our tent, bending it over to where there's hardly room for us to get in. But pretty soon we'll get in it anyway and it'll be okay. The poles are just bent a little bit, but that's not going to hurt us a whole lot. At least we'll get a good night's sleep tonight. We're not certain of tomorrow night. We may not have a tent to sleep in if that wind keeps going like this for very much longer. We'll just have a few ragged shreds of what was once a tent. In spite of the wind, a few geese are heading off to their feeding grounds. The next morning, we're up at the first light of day, and we're going to go down, and Marge is showing me just exactly how to put that worm on so you'll catch a fish. But I'm supposed to be the macho fisherman, and I just brought her along to do the cooking. We had our little rubber raft along, so I thought I'd take to it and see if I could catch a big one on a fly. That looks like a good idea, so I'll go out there and give that a try for a little while. Try as I might, I couldn't get one to bite. Then Marge suggested I come into shore. I threw my hook out, and I'll be darned if I didn't hook a nice big one. But that fish outsmarted me again and got away. And it looks like she has another one on here as he fights for his life in the waters at Chickahominy Reservoir as she pulls him up closer and closer to shore.
There he is. Pull him up on the bank so he doesn't flop back in. He's nice and fat though.
Mm-hmm. And he swallowed it, I think.
Next it's my turn to hook into one of these rainbow trout. And he jumped numerous times and almost jumped right up on shore before he broke away. We both had enough of the fish in here. It wasn't as good as it could have been. So we decide to go down and look Diamond Crater over. Diamond Crater looked real nice, but we're going to save that for the next time. We're going to move on and find us a place to camp before it gets dark.
And I'm the one that's supposed to be inflating the air mattress. So I'm getting it all inflated nice and fat here, doing just exactly what I'm told.
Marge is cooking the fish for supper, and boy does that look and smell good. I hope she doesn't cut me too short on that fish just because she says I'm getting too fat, but boy, I am hungry, and is that fish ever delicious. If I were one of the Creator's helpers and my job was to make a campground, this would have been my number one choice. Right behind our tent there was a big cliff, and the cliff swallows are building their nests here. Of a morning and evening they seem to have a mating ritual, and then during the day they work on their nests. They're at various stages of completion now. Some of them are nearly done, and others have just begun. But they flutter and fly around and squawk for a little while each morning and each evening, and I think this is part of their mating ritual here. These little nests are like a work of art. They even have a little neck when they're completed. None of them are completely finished yet, but the birds, it seems like one will go in the nest and then another will follow. So that must be a pair of them. And sometimes a third one tries to get in, but he has no luck. Pretty soon we look up there and there are two little heads peeking out of every single nest. This ceremony only lasts a little while, but every morning and every evening it goes on. And then the rest of the day is spent with serious matters like nest construction and catching insects in flight, as these cliff swallows do. Every inch of protected area on this cliff are used for nests. They'll build their nests right in the protected spot where a big chunk of rock has fallen off. And every year after they get done using these nests, they dry out and fall to the ground. That way they can build a brand new nest each year, and they don't become so full of bugs and things. Nature has provided very well for these little birds. There's only room for these two birds in the nest. Sometimes the third one tries to come in, and he gets booted out in one hurry. This area must be the young birds. They haven't got their nest constructed quite as fast as the ones in the other areas there. This is certainly a major nesting colony of the cliff swallows here. Each bird is responsible for building their own nest, and if they decide not to build a nest, no one else is going to do it for them. So that's survival of the fittest. Right up through the sunset, this mating ritual goes on, and then to start again at first light in the morning. Our second sunset out in southeast Oregon is equally as spectacular as the first one, as the sun creeps its way down over the horizon in front of a couple of little trees here. The next morning at first light, we're on our way fishing. We see a few geese standing on top of rock here, looking their territory over and making a lot of racket. A jackrabbit is nibbling on some sagebrush tips here. He relies on his camouflage to hide himself here before he hops off into the safety of the sagebrush. When we reach the fishing hole, I immediately inflate our inflatable raft and we take out to the water, and boy, in a hurry, my pole starts bending and I've got a fish on.
He's small?
Well, he's a nice one. You got the net?
Yep.
And it looks like another fish dinner's in order. That is, providing this guy doesn't figure out a way to get away from us. Here we just barely get started fishing, and we're getting bites and we're catching fish.
You have to bring him over.
These large rainbows do a lot of fighting and jumping. They have a reputation for being some really good fighters.
He's just not wanting to come in. You're getting him under the boat.
There's no way of hurrying it up. If you try to do that, you probably lose the fish. So I very patiently let him wear himself down to where I can get him in the net and bring him aboard. I just get him up next to the boat, thinking that we finally have him, and then he'll find the strength for another run, and he keeps trying to get under that boat. And there's some things on there he could get hooked on, so we have to keep him out from under the boat.
There, you got him. Oh, he's a nice one.
Finally, we get that fish worn out, and Crumble Reservoir gives up another one of its big, nice pink
I better get my line out.
rainbows.
Well, I gotta start moving first.
Okay, hold him up. Yeah, that's a nice one. Put him on the stringer with your big one.
Next, it looks like it's Marge's turn to get one on, as the fish battles and dives and jumps on the surface, and he's from one side of the boat to the other.
Can you see how big he is?
Where should I bring him?
Oh, just wherever you can.
Oh, where's it best for you?
Right over here. You don't mind?
As long as your Ford tender doesn't get in it. This is a nice one.
Yeah, he's nice. There.
The early morning breeze started blowing a pretty good clip, so Marge wanted to go over and fish from shore, and it looks like that's working for her.
Yeah.
She's got one on here as she battles him
Yeah,
to her perch high
yeah, I
up
can
on the rock.
just swing him in. Just stand right there and
Maybe I lost him. Oh, he's still there. Well, come down here. If I fool around, I'll lose him. No, he's not. Oh, he's not those baby ones. He's got some good size to him. Oh, wow, look at him take off. I'll hold my pole up. He wants to get off. Okay, I'm gonna bring him right in. Ah, Tom! There! I thought you lost him. Oh, he's a nice one. There, he's my big one for the day. Okay.
I smell something very sweet along the lake's edge, and it's a bouquet of choke cherries growing right out of the rocks. And now it's my time to hook into one of these big guys.
The famous
Right from
get
here,
off.
perched up on the rocks. And here he comes, and he's twisting and turning and jumping and really putting up a gallant fight as he comes up closer and closer to shore.
Bring him around. Your net's upside down. There, you got him.
Another one of these fighters in the net for our stringer. So we're going to have us a real fish feed now. A little lizard wants to get in on the action, so he jumps from one rock to another, and then he'll ham it up here doing a few push-ups with Crumble Lake as a backdrop. There seem to be plenty of ants around here for him to catch here on the rock, and as long as we remain somewhat still, he seems to come right up by us, and occasionally he'll even run over you. Looks like he's watching my fish pole for me there to see if maybe I get a bite. The sun is sinking closer and closer to the horizon, so we make the decision to gather up our fish and call it a day and get back to our campsite and see what the swallows are doing and have a fish dinner. As we start across the parking lot, we see one of the Great Basin gopher snakes crawling across the pavement here in the parking lot. He was kind of a crabby guy and didn't seem to have much patience for my camera. The Great Basin gopher snake is a harmless intimidator. He'll do a lot of hissing and act like he's going to strike, but they're non-venomous, so if he strikes you, it won't hurt too much. He might lose a few holder teeth in your skin, which can easily be pulled out. They grab a hold of their prey with these little holder teeth and hold on to it, and then they wrap around it, squeezing the very life out of their prey, and then they unhinge their jaw and swallow it. I usually make certain they find their way off the roads or parking lot in this case, because someone else might not notice and might run over this snake. After all, they are very good mouse traps, and some say that they'll even kill rattlesnakes, but I know some snakes eat other snakes. That's a common occurrence in the world. We make a brief stop at this site of early American rock art carved deeply into the rocks, just a short distance from Crumble. Back at our campsite, we see the monkey flowers are blooming really nicely, and there's some excellent watercress here. I have to have some of that for my salad for supper. I'll test it just to make certain that it's the right thing, and oh boy, that is some really good watercress out of one of these springs that flow down out of the Steens Mountain area here. These numerous springs seem to pop up everywhere here, giving life to the monkey flowers and the rest of the foliage here around the desert. A cliff swallow decided to build her nest in the picnic shelter. She didn't realize she was a cliff swallow, not a picnic shelter swallow. The only way she can get it to stick is to attach it to a bolt inside this picnic shelter, and she's flying around here making a lot of racket. A robin chose this cottonwood for its nest, and it works on the nest a while, and then it's time to go out and see what he can scrounge up for dinner. And he hears a worm crawling there. He waits till just the right minute, and then he grabs that worm and pulls like fury on the worm till he gets him out of the ground, and now it's time to feast on that nice, luscious worm. There must not be any baby robins in the nest, because he seems to be eating the whole thing. If there were babies, part of it would have to go for them. Right behind our camp is where several springs have converged and run in a little creek as they head down toward the Blitzen River, and the cliffs are right above them where the swallows live. Just as regular as clockwork. These swallows have their ritual twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. It looks like we're getting in on it again. And wow, our tent's taken a few hits while we were off fishing today. So it looks like I'm going to have to be washing a tent fly. We pull up what remains of our tent after the wind the other night and now the swallows, and we're going to move to the Albert Desert. I lift the tent up and here's a little mouse underneath it. We're going to catch this little mouse and take a look at him. And oh, is he a cute little guy. He's got the big ears and the long whiskers and the wiggly little nose. Our destination will be the Albert Hot Springs. We watch a few birds setting on the posts as we travel by and chart a course toward the Albert Hot Springs. At the willows on the banks of the Blitzen River, a couple of kind of shaggy deer. This is the time of year they shed their winter coats for their summer coats, are grazing along here in the lush grass along the banks of the river. We're heading toward French Glen, and then it'll be down 205 down the Catlow Valley. Some antelope demonstrate the proper way you cross a fence if you're an antelope. I think if I were an antelope, I'd jump across the fence myself, but who am I to criticize the world's fastest long-distance runner? I guess when you've earned that title, you can go through the fence any way you want. This fence doesn't seem to have barbs on the bottom wire. That's good for the antelope. That way they won't be getting cut on the barbed wire. This little bit older buck is having a little more trouble getting under the fence, but he makes it in good style. He turns back and looks, and he's on his way across the great Catlow Valley. This valley seems to go on forever. It was one time an old dry lake bed. Further down the valley, there's a group of mares with their colts. The colts are all laying down napping, and the mares are standing by their sides waiting for them to complete their nap. In just a few years, these little colts will be great big strong cow ponies carrying a cowboy high up into the Steens Mountains to drive cattle up to their summer range. Each mother is standing by, patiently waiting for her baby colt to finish his nap. I'll bet you this one becomes a spunky little cow pony when he grows up,